Today we're going to cover invoice against contract. I'm going to break this into 5 separate videos to downsize it into more palatable sizes. The first will be an overview. The second will be the options and flexibility of invoice against contract. The third will be the auto invoice and evaluated receipt settlement. Then we'll roll into receiving options, and then the last video will be a demo of the setup and configuration.
Okay, wanted to walk through a simple setup of a few different options that we spoke about earlier today. So I've already created my contract workspace. If you have an integrated realm with sourcing and or contracts and Ariba buying and invoicing, it'll look like this. If you just have buying and invoicing, you'll be able to create these terms automatically. So I'm actually going to click and open the contract terms here. And kind of walk through a sample setup and different options that are available. So we talked about the 4 different types. Again, item level is the most used. Stick with that today. Blanket purchase order, we talked about this at pretty good length about it being simply how it sends it to the network. There's an additional option when you check this, which is to hide both the unit price and the amount from the supplier. That's useful if you don't have specific terms with the supplier within the contract, but don't want to show it on the network on that purchase order what limits you've placed upon them either. And so that's useful. In this case, we aren't going to do that. I do want to scroll down here, and you'll notice I don't have a lot of options here, but as soon as I select release required no, I then have all kinds of options. All of them are pretty self-explanatory, but it looks a little scary when you first click it and get all those options. First one says, do you want to allow invoicing against contract? Obviously, the whole principle here is that I do. In some cases, if you're doing tiered discounts or accumulators, you may not want to allow invoicing against a contract. So that is an option. Default invoice requester from contract. That allows you basically whether the invoice requester can be ad hoc or whether it is a specific individual that is named up here at the top, the contract contact. That's actually useful for contracts that have multiple properties or multiple business units on it. Instead of defaulting it to one person, you can allow the invoice to dictate who it routes to. Allow suppliers to add non-catalog items. Again, if it's generic and you don't have all the defined terms in the contract, you may want to allow that. In this case, we know all the defined terms, so we're going to choose no. Allow the supplier to edit invoice price. Again, if it's not clearly defined or if it has flexibility, you'll want to check that as a yes, but many times you'll leave it as no. And then allow the supplier to enter invoice accounting. Some companies do actually have suppliers that know the accounting for specific lines or businesses that call them for some of the ad hoc demand stuff. In this case, though, obviously most suppliers, that's probably rarely used. And so because you set the accounting on the line item, not your suppliers, because they don't know your internal accounting. And then finally, allow receiving against contract. In this case, I don't want to do any receiving, so we're going to choose that as no. So next, you can either hit this next button or you can come up here and choose limits. They'll take you to the same place. It doesn't matter how you navigate there. Effectively, you have, again, all these different limits. You have your minimum release commitments. You have your maximum limits. In this case, we'll do a maximum limit of 1.5 million. Whether it excludes or includes taxes, we talked about that, and then whether it's hard limits or not. We talked about the notifications as well. Won't go through that too much because I want to get to the actual pricing terms. So in this particular case, you'll notice that I have materials and services, fixed and recurring fees, and cost and expense. So I'm going to walk through an example that will cover off on all 3 of these, and that is something that all of you know very well, which is an SAP Ariba contract. So generally when you had an SAP Ariba contract, you had deployment services to set up and deploy the system. So we're going to throw that in the materials and services bucket. You have an annual or fixed reoccurring fee, and then you had some type of travel and expense associated with the service. So we're going to first add some of the service line items. You'll notice that it actually takes you to the catalog. You can't add catalog items. That's actually how you do a lot of the tiered pricing for catalog items is you'll create a contract and then tie that catalog item to the contract to set up the tiered pricing. We obviously have some fields that we have to fill in here. So we'll go ahead and complete those real quick. Okay, so we've added our fields: hourly rate, what it is, commodity code, basic information. Now we can add our maximum limits. In this case, we'll say it's for 6 months, which is 1,080 hours. I want zero tolerance. You can only set it by quantity or amount, so you can't set it by any other factors. In some cases, when you try to do split allocations for split accounting, it's only done by percentage, but in this case, it's quantity or price. Again, we aren't going to talk about tiered pricing just yet. We will get to that momentarily. And so now we've added our line item there for our project manager. Now I'm going to come down and I'm going to do a fixed and recurring fee. And this will be our annual subscription maintenance for our SAP Ariba contract. And then we'll throw our commodity code of software in here, probably business function software, business function specific software, and we'll set that reoccurring as 250,000 with a reoccurrence yes. And you'll notice the system automatically defaults this based on the contract dates. We're going to change that slightly to an October 31st, which should be the proper term for 12 months, and it automatically calculates that it's monthly. Now, if we go over here and choose this as an annual, you'll notice that this changes to 1 annual occurrence. I'm going to hit OK. Sorry, I keep forgetting the bill to. Do that, and then finally we're going to add our travel and expense. So this is our T&E bucket of money. Travel and food, lodging, and entertainment looks correct, and we'll just set that as a $20,000 maximum. Again, accounting is all there. We'll go ahead and do our bill to this time so that we don't error that out. And so this is an example where you can set up a multitude of items, so to speak, on a contract terms to be invoiced against. You can have your project manager up here, you can have your annual subscription, and then you can have your T&E down here below. So very useful tool, great for managing a lot of those bigger services contracts where POs don't necessarily do it justice. Same thing if you have, multi-year contracts, it's useful to use this because I can come in here, edit this, change this term to several years out, and it will automatically calculate that as well. And so you'll notice it automatically changed that to 2 years. It won't let me actually go past the expiration date, so it's important if you are tying it back to your contract workspace that you change it on the contract workspace, as those two documents are tied together.
Thank you for the time today.